think the first port of call is to get to know you guys. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, but also, what superhero would you be and why?
I was not ready for a question.
Okay. Lucian Corlan. I'm responsible for AppSec in a company called Sage, a company that does accounting, payroll, payments, and people software. Superhero, I watched this film recently called The Boys. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's atypical superheroes. I won't pick one, but I can only say that this film startled me, and I'm re-evaluating my favorite superhero at the moment.
I think wanting to be anyone from The Boys says quite a lot about your psychology. Can I swap seats? Sorry. Yeah, I'm Kevin Fielder, CISO for Just Eat. Superhero would probably be Iron Man, just because toys. Let's be honest.
Hey, my name's Noel Dunne. I work for RB, or Reckitt, Benckiser. If I was going to be a superhero, I'd be Captain Underpants. So I don't take myself that seriously. But yeah, if I was going to pick one, be that guy.
What's Captain Underpants' secret power? It's a pants, yeah.
It's more singing, so if you guys have got young children and you've seen the film, but anyway.
Thank you, Matias, Madou. Superhero. Unfortunately, I do not watch a lot of movies, and I'm very boring. I'm a super realist, so I do not believe in all of that stuff, so I don't have one. Sorry, Sean. I'm not making your life easier now.
Yeah, so we've Captain Underpants, one guy that's re-evaluating his superhero, one guy that doesn't believe in it, and we've Iron Man. Yeah.
What's your next question?
So, to kick things off, guys, look, security awareness is subjective at the best. We all have our own definitions, so I'd be interested to hear your actual definition of security awareness, but also, where does it start?
I'll start. Cool. I think we need to move away from the term awareness for a start, because being aware of it doesn't mean you care. So fundamentally, we do all of this stuff and we're trying to make people aware of things, but give a shit, excuse me, but do they? And that's the thing. So we need to actually get people to care about this stuff and work out how to engage with people, whether it's AppSec, whether it's your wider organisation, whether it's your exec, and work out what will make them care about this stuff and how to engage with them in a way that makes them think, actually, I care about this. Because I think one of the challenges we have in kind of AppSec world isn't that the developers don't care. I think developers do. I think developers are all really passionate about doing a good job, but many organisations are product-led, and there's often a push to get new feature X out the door. You're in a competitive market. You've got to win in the market, all of this stuff, which is great and genuine, but you have to work on how you get the broader people outside of your developer community to understand that, as I think Sam mentioned, or Matias, that quality, security should be one of your quality components. So you've got kind of resilience, reliability, scalability, all of those things. Security needs to be in there as part of your quality measures. And then the developers can have the time to build the secure part and learn about security and everything else. So I think it's the wider piece first, get your organisation on board with security being a key quality measure, and then you can then spend the time with developers because they'll be given the time because it's one of the measures they're measured against. Overuse of the word measure, sorry.
I think the key point is to make it relevant. So, you know, whether it's security or IT, you've kind of got to make security relevant for your particular organisation. Now, if you're one of the fortunate, actually unfortunate guys that kind of work in finance, generally the maturity level from a security perspective is perhaps that little bit higher than, say, the rest of us. So people that work in consumer goods, which RB is. Prior to RB, I was kind of sort of I worked for an advertising agency, so where you would have stuff that you would take for granted within sort of the financial sector, within organisations that don't sort of sit in that mould where you're driven by compliance, you've then got to make that relevant, and that could be Yammer, that could be So within RB, we have a Yammer group. So Yammer goes across 40,000 employees, and we try and make security fun. So a few weeks ago, I kind of made a video of my 10-year-old daughter with a hack RF device that you can pick up from sort of Amazon for like $250. And we were, in effect, doing the keyless car fob hack and sort of breaking into cars, which was kind of quite good fun. And sort of posting that, using a 10-year-old child or a stooge, is kind of sort of bringing sort of security to the fore that a child can get this as well. But you've kind of got to make it relevant and kind of make it fun, and sort of engage. And Yammer as a tool within an organisation is your vehicle to do that. Is kind of quite cool. So the video here that we do today will probably go out to 40,000 people within sort of RB when that sort of lands with us, and that's only a good thing.
So that's why you're driving a Porsche these days. on awareness, on awareness, I think I see a little. I would like to compare that to 20 years ago. 20 years ago, companies still had an internet team, for example. So where the idea was like, hey, think about our internet strategy. What should we do to go to the internet? This weird kind of thing. And I think we're in a very similar transition these days where we have a separate AppSec team that is responsible for application security. It should be more embedded into the entire organization. It should be a property that everybody is doing. Everybody should be doing security. Like right now, everybody is doing internet or thinking about, hey, how can we broadcast things, or how can we make sure that people are aware of us? So where right now it's just a single thing in an organization, it has to be a thing within the entire organization. That is, to me, the key.
I have a short answer. I think it's about being up to date with what's going on in the world. You develop software. You have to understand where that software sits in the world, who is interested in it, and ways in which they would be interested in it, not just using it but misusing it. And it's also about fighting cognitive bias, and I can add more about that later.
Interesting. So it's really about changing behaviour and creating a dynamic culture and an unsiloed culture. So Noel, you kind of touched on an accelerator to that around creating a fun environment. But Sage have done a lot of work, especially in the security champions area, to accelerate the behavioural change. Can you share some tips and accelerators that you've successfully done?
The interesting bit about Sage is that it's very diverse. Sage bought many other businesses, and it decided to kind of leave some of them alone, not to meddle too much, because they were on profit. This means diversity is pretty acute, and there's different cultures that you have to deal with. So the solution we came up with was to have, first of all, many champions, but have lead champions as well. So to a small AppSec team, which is now actually 6 people for 3,000 technology, we need these lead champions to promote what we're doing and what people should be doing about secure coding in Sage. And the global team is 150 security champions, and actually in Sage, we use Secure Code Warrior in Sage, just to be clear, but it is not developers that use it, but actually security champions right now. We felt that it would be a bit of a culture shock and a process shock for every single dev in Sage to go through a gamified training. So we started a bit more traditional with the rest of the devs. But that traditional is slightly tailored. So for us, it's about the developer, the security champion, choosing the course they need, not us telling them what course they need. So we give them a number of options, some 68 modules, and they choose the one that applies better to them. So for example, there's one called GDPR for developers. Maybe that's what they want. Threat modeling, great. So it's giving them the choice, having a virtual team of leaders around the topic to work with the AppSec team, which is again a small team, and trying to do this globally, which is the main challenge actually. I think this was kind of mentioned earlier, not only languages as in technical languages, but actual languages spoken by people and local mentalities which have to be respected.
Cool. Anyone want to add to that?
What was that question again? Sorry. I'll be honest.
I think it actually ties into one of the questions from the crowd is what would be the first step in getting developers involved, but more importantly, how do you accelerate that?
So I think a lot of it is getting them, obviously we have things like gamifying and everything else, but it's engaging them in the whole process. So like my AppSec team is all ex-engineers, so it's not people that are, I mean obviously still engineers, they still write code, we still build security tools and things. So the AppSec people are not people from a security background, they're people who are developers who understand how they used to work and how people in engineering work. And even things like the training stuff, so we're trying in Secure Code Warrior and other things, but we're testing it with our engineers. So we're not saying, here's a security tool, you must use this. We've got effectively security champions and Slack channels and all this kind of stuff, and a bunch of people trialing them and giving us feedback on what they thought's good, what isn't good, which one they like best. So when we roll a tool out, it's a tool they've helped choose. So we're not going to say we think this tool's better. If they prefer a certain tool, they're going to get the one they prefer. So we get that engagement of, hey, we're working with you, we want to kind of do things with you guys and how you want to work, which I think is how all security needs to be, how we fit with how they want to work. You touched on threat modeling as well, so we do quite a bit of threat modeling, because I find you get that, it's kind of, I love it because it gets you a better design, but it also gets you sneaky training, because you sit down with a bunch of people, whether it's an infrastructure thing or an app thing, and look at wherever you've kind of defined your box, and look at all the threats that can happen to it, and talk to them about, if I did this, what would happen? What bad stuff could someone do to this? And get the people building it really engaged in, oh, I didn't think about that. So they come away with a better designed solution, but also with some more awareness because they've sneakily been trained about all the bad things we could do. So work on all the things you can do to kind of engage with people, come to a better outcome without having to point out bad things, because you're like, let's work with you on how we could do this as well as possible. So for me, it's just all that, engaging with them throughout the process and making sure they're involved in choosing how we do things.
And Kevin, on that, buy-in is important. And
Yep.
do you think, does it take a longer time to get more buy-in from developers, or have you seen it scale quickly because of the proactiveness with security?
So I think it might take slightly longer at the initiation where you're kind of choosing something, because you can't just go, bang, here's your product, get on with it, or your process, or whatever else. So it takes a bit longer, us getting engaged, us understanding how people want to work, getting the feedback. But once you've got that, you get much quicker uptake and engagement because they're already engaged. So it's not security saying do this, it's security saying we've worked with you on how we should do this, now let's roll this out. And you've got a bunch of already built champions because they help choose it, and they're going, hey, we're involved in this, we think it's great. So the rollout and the uptake gets much quicker, even if the sort of initial piece is a bit slower.
Thanks, Simon. I think so. We've got a culture within RB where we're allowed to disrupt, and I think my MO, and I've been doing this stuff for a little while, is to go into an organisation and just to set fire to the place. Just
Work with me or I'm burning it.
So
We can edit this, can't we?
You've kind of got to sort of make a splash. And I think the first project I kind of worked on at sort of RB was a thing that was an IoT sort of project, and we built 20,000 of these things. And off the back of a bunch of activities that I kind of sort of led, those 20,000 things had to be put onto the skip. But at a cost of over $1 million. And we were, literally, we were stealing bank account records, payroll data. And we kind of sort of built up a backlog of stuff. And we kind of spent a few months doing that. And we then sort of presented that back to the grown-ups and to the organisation. And it's like, wow, you guys kind of know stuff. And it's like, okay, we've had a bit of playtime sort of breaking stuff. Now comes the interesting part, and this is where you kind of take ownership. And it's like, you kind of fix what you find. So it's not just about finding a defect and throwing that over the fence to development to say, hey, go and deal with that. Actually, you're sort of hand-holding the devs to say, okay, we found this problem, but this is the path to green to sort of avoid that problem. And maybe that approach is not sort of reflective in most organisations, but where you're within a company that, as I said, from a maturity point of view, isn't a software house or a finance house. You've almost got to, sort of grab the attention of the grown-ups and grab the attention of kind of your key stakeholders. Blowing stuff up is great, but fundamentally you've kind of got to fix what you find and actually sort of take ownership and leadership and sort of lead them sort of on that path and on that journey. So original question was, how can we engage more of the developers? How can we spread better within the organization? I think there's also a reality that it has to happen. And in a lot of organizations, security just has to happen. If you look at PCI compliance, a lot of organizations, they need to get something going into the organization. So, and on the one hand, we have to make that a reality to developers too, that they understand, there has to be something in place, okay? And once that realization comes for them, involve them in that decision-making process, like how would you like to do that eventually? So they have to do it. There's no way around that for compliancy reasons, but then make something that they are heavily involved with, that they can approve, that they say, yes, this is the way that we see things. We know we need to make an investment, but this is the path we want to go together. And I think that's the best way to move forward in an organization. First of all, make them realize that something has to happen, because the company rallies behind security. And if it has to happen, how do they see the world? How do they want to approach that? How do they want to be trained or be guided? Or how do they think about security? Involve them, heavily involve them, so that they say, yes, this is the way we see it.
Should compliance be a byproduct of a good security culture?
Sure, but I'm just picking on one thing, which is compliancy, because I know a lot of financial institutions, they have compliancy as a driver. If it's only compliancy, it's not going to work. It's definitely not going to work. If you just want to tick in the box, do something that nobody cares about. It's not going to work. The company has to rally behind it. But I'm always convinced that yes, it is compliancy. It's a tick in the box, but make it something meaningful. Don't waste your time on just rolling something quickly out for that tick in the box and move on. I would say make it something meaningful that everybody learns, and if you do it the right way, it has a positive impact on everything. Sure.
I mean, I think compliance is a good thing. So where you've got, whether it's PCI or GDPR or financial regs, effectively that is your sort of start for 10 in terms of getting stuff done. So even though I kind of sort of view sort of compliance is not quite a dirty word, but compliance, doesn't necessarily equal secure. So compliance is a starter for 10 is great, but it is then sort of driving that and using that in the right way to kind of get your sort of agenda done.
Cool. I suppose the way you position it could be an accelerator. So we spoke about accelerators and really kind of capturing the mindset of the developer, but in your experience, what's the biggest resistance from developers when it comes to engaging in security training or engaging in security in general?
I think time and backlog. So, so some of the guys here have kind of said that, developers are there to kind of do the right thing. They're not there not to do security. The issue that they have is kind of sort of prioritization. And they're employed to, build functional stuff and functional components, and sometimes rightly or wrongly, you know, those non-functional areas that cover security, and some of those security user stories may not necessarily get covered. So it's not about them not doing stuff, it's more around sort of prioritization.
Yeah, concur. That's what I was saying earlier. It's just getting the business and kind of the wide tech org on board with what should be part of your quality measures to make sure they've got time. And then it's just the lack of knowledge. You know, we all spend our jobs and our day jobs thinking about bad people and bad things because it's our jobs. If you haven't come from that background, you don't necessarily think about what bad people can do this. You're in the world of happy path because, hey, I've written this thing, it does cool stuff. And that's fine, because their job is to do that. So our job is to engage them, to get them more aware of the fact there isn't always happy path, and what bad things could people do. So it's the combination of getting that time and that buy-in, and then helping people understand that nefarious people are out there and they really do want to do bad stuff.
I want to mention product managers. We mentioned developers, but actually, who governs their time? Product managers. So we took a decision to invite absolutely everyone in technology into development security training. Now, some of them might find it too advanced, and we want them to tell us that. I don't think this training is for me because I'm not technical enough, or I don't know how to do it. Great, that's also useful feedback for us. So product managers are really important, and other functions in your technology teams, not just the devs. I also want to add a few points on devs themselves. There's a lot of what I mentioned earlier, cognitive bias from developers. Some of them will not want to fail, so they are afraid of failing. Some of them will be attracted by whatever is your first message. So it's important how you introduce yourself, as how you introduce security to them. If you make it sound like it's too difficult, then they might be detracted. There is this example. How do people try to sell stuff to you? So they will show you the most expensive thing initially, because then everything else will look to you like it's not as expensive. So you might buy more stuff. But actually, how does that work with security? If you go to the board and say, this is the worst that can happen, great, but then they might ignore all of the other things. So you have to, and it's the same with devs. Same with product managers. You can scare them, but I think it's just spending more time with them, trying to communicate this capability that the whole team needs to provide. It's a capability in the end. We're providing a quality product, and quality does not mean whatever it used to mean anymore. It includes security, and the product manager needs to be, him or her, proud about the security features of their product and sell it maybe through security. Not long ago, I'm not advertising them, but PayPal had an ad in my neighborhood in London, which is called Nappy Valley, and the ad was directed to mothers that are supposed to use PayPal because it's secure. So that's how they advertise PayPal in Nappy Valley in London, through security.
Interesting. So awareness or training costs time, but it also costs money as well. So I think there's no question about the importance of a well-structured training process or awareness process, or whatever we want to call it. We're really trying to change behavior. So how have you, for the audience, how have you vocalized with the CFO or your CIO or your CTO or even the board to get the adequate resources you need to run a successful program?
Okay, so first, I believe the leadership, the board needs to trust the representative of the security team. So normally that's the CISO. They need to present the team in a way that they look capable, even if they're not maybe at that point in time. And certainly maybe they need more resources. So first of all, there needs to be trust between the board and the team responsible for security. Second, what do you focus on? So earlier, risks were mentioned. Obviously, always the board will talk about risks. But actually, recently, someone in the board said, I want to know what is the number of data subjects. Okay, we'll devise the risk eventually, but I want to know, how does the whole thing look like? What is the scope that we're looking at? How many millions of data subjects do we store in our databases? What are we actually exposed to? And this is also in the context of some of the breaches that we know have happened. And a last point is with one specific breach, the British Airways one. This actually, and especially the amount that was vehiculated in the press, this prompted the board to ask the security team, where are we with this? And what are our developers doing to avoid something like that, or our teams in general? Because actually we don't. I'm not sure if we really know what happened there. British Airways never really completely divulgated the situation, the hack. So they will be prompted by events. You need to be prepared. You need to know how to interpret the event for them in the context of your business, and then come up with a plan in which they trust to involve absolutely everyone. So again, a capability. Security is everyone's responsibility, but is everyone capable, and do they know what they need to be capable for? I'll stop here.
Yeah, I guess following that, I do have to go and do that bit of the CISO role. It is about that more holistic view, so they're not necessarily going to be, the board and that aren't going to be delving right into it. What are you doing about this or that, or AppSec or whatever else, unless it's, hey, we've seen this breach, is it going to happen to us? But you have to have that that broader holistic, for want of a better word, security program. So you have a strategy program, all of that kind of thing that covers off all areas of security that you're working on, and you take them through what you're doing and why and how it benefits the business in as best job you can, business language and business risk. And also get them on board with that, get them trusting that and the overall program. So then when there's a line in the budget for AppSec training or threat modeling or whatever else, that's part of your AppSec program and how you're improving or managing business risk from an application perspective. So get them on board with that kind of thing and trusting what you're doing as that. Much as none of us like it, we all have to also get that external, a lot of us will have that external validation. So there'll be a big four type person come in and review your program and say, yeah, that looks fine. So usually I don't, I'll rant about the value of that later, but that kind of thing does help because boards like that. So have that external validation from someone that says, hey, your program's ticking the boxes, you're improving your maturity, that kind of thing. And the other stuff is have the good the positive story. So where there are things like, if you get asked a question like the BA one, we might not know exactly, but a lot of the press was around, it looked like it was a bit of third-party code. So if they say, are we vulnerable to this, or what we're doing about this, you can talk about how you're looking for third-party security issues in your pipeline and you do testing and things. So you can have a coherent story. So when they do have those questions, you've got a coherent response. It doesn't say, hey, we're perfect, but we are working in those areas, which probably touched on another thing around AppSec that's hard now. I don't know what the exact percentages are, but 60, 70, 80% of code people deploy isn't your own code now. So although we're talking about writing loads of code, a big chunk of what's in your app wasn't written by your devs. So having a strong program around how you do secure design and test third-party libraries and all those kind of things, as well as just training your engineers, is really important.
I'm going to touch on that third-party development because I think it's important. I think, Noel, you're probably the right person to touch on that. But more, more specifically, there's Jahari window, the three circles of influence or control. The first circle you can control, which is maybe your internal devs. Influence and what we can't control are probably third party. So how do you breed your security program and your culture onto third party developers and development?
It's super hard. Controlling the devs that sit within your organisation is kind of a relatively straightforward problem to solve, but the issue touched on around the stuff that you don't write is kind of the Achilles heel in RB. So 2 years ago, 2.25 years ago, we were kind of hit by NotPetya, which was effectively a third-party piece of code that ran out of one of our services in the Ukraine, and overnight that actually, over the space of 14 minutes, that shut down 20,000 laptops and 2,000 servers, and that took 41 days to recover completely from that. It was literally Armageddon, and sort of the write-down costs for that, it was sort of spoke about sort of in the press cost as, you know, upwards of 100 million. So, you know, the issue we have is not just about sort of off-the-shelf products that you sort of deploy within your estate. It's the stuff that people write that you may or may not necessarily have control over, and that's where you get tooling like, so Jeremy Long at Wells Fargo, who has dependency check, and then you've got some of the commercial products out of Checkmarks and sort of Black Duck to do, you know, binary analysis on the stuff of third-party components is kind of cool. But if you rely on, you know, third-party development houses and digital agencies to kind of build stuff, they're going to build stuff as quickly and as cheaply as possible, and if, in effect, you know, the idea of shifting left, you know, the artifact that you kind of get at the end of that is either a mobile app or it's kind of a website, and the practices, you know, that we were kind of talking about 15, 20 years ago are sort of apparent there, and that's you know, that's the thing for us. Regarding sort of the BA sort of hack, I've got a screenshot, so I'll probably share after this. But the thing that kind of hit BA sort of last year, they were vulnerable about 6 years ago. They were affected, and it was a piece of work that I was involved with. But in effect, had the capability to run code and scrape credit card data and all that kind of stuff. And although that was 2013. You have people that are kind of forgetting the answers and forgetting what should have been lessons learned.
Same question. Let's see. I think if I look at new and upcoming companies, I see there's a lot happening in decomposition analysis. I think Jeremy Long with his dependency check went into that direction, but definitely that space is becoming more and more hot, where people are figuring out like, hey, what is really in our code these days? Like, what do we own ourselves, and what did we pull in? And not only from a vulnerability perspective, but also from a licensing perspective. Like, well, what is the license attached to these third-party libraries? What's really in there? And if you go into that library, what kind of library are they calling, and what do they depend on? It's something, for me, in security in general, it's the difference between short-term and long-term. Where do you want to be? Do you want to play a short-term game, and everything is like that, you know, compliance is like that? Do you want to tick in the box and just be done? Do you want to quickly figure out, oh, we're going to use that and not that? Is it short-term game or is it long-term game? Do you want to see long-term, a year from now, improvements? Then it's going to take work. It's going to take analysis. It's not going to be easy. Let's put it that way. But a year from now, you're going to be able to go twice as fast. And back to your board question, like fear sells. Yes, fear sells. I know that fear sells, but let's focus on the positive thing. For example, your PayPal one is a great one. Like, how can we sell to the board? Oh, by the way, if we do security, we can sell in that particular neighborhood because that's where a lot of moms live, or I don't know what it was, but it's going to, you know, they want to be secure. So how can you put a positive message forward, and especially around businesses and to the board, like, how can it even bring more money into the business instead of selling fear? So I'm all for more a long-term perspective than short-term. Product managers was another good one. Product managers, they want to do short-term game. If you have a good product manager, he wants to build something for the future that he can be proud of 4 years from now, not a month from now. He's gonna care about what's gonna be released next month, but he's gonna be especially care about where he's gonna be a year from now. So it's all about short-term game versus what can we do long-term.
That's good. And I think you touched on an important point is visibility. Providing visibility not to the board, but to developers themselves and even to your third party. And it's a circle of communication as well. So we've touched on how we maybe engage developers and accelerate that. We've touched on the overall culture. We've touched on how we get more money. And we've touched on maybe what's outside of our control, i.e. third-party development. But the three of you've implemented programs. You know, what has been the key output or outcomes from those programs, positive outcomes? And any key learnings that or any mistakes you've made that you can share with the audience today?
Obviously, the positive outcomes, engagement. And I think as we touched on before, it's compliance training. Like as we touched, developers and engineers are intelligent people who like solving problems, like learning things. I'm firmly of the belief that compliance training, not all compliance, but compliance training for devs and your organisation has never moved the needle from a security perspective, ever. People just go next, guess the answers at the end, tick the box, right? It's just pointless. So you have to try and throw as much of that out the window as you can, because they hate that. And even if your compliance training is some sort of tick box you have to do, they associate it with it coming from you. So get rid of it, work with your people team, your HR team, whoever owns it, and try and get rid of as much of the compliance stuff as possible, and then work with them on things that they enjoy more and that they feel they're learning from. And then hopefully, as we touched on, if you do good security, you get compliance. So you do good things and do the right things from a security perspective, you're going to get the output because your engineers like your training, like your threat modeling, like your engagement. And all you've got to do is have something that links into AD or whatever, and you go, look, here's the proof they've all done it. Great, tick the box. But they've done it because they're engaged. So get rid of anything that they don't like as much as possible. Work on engaging with everyone in ways that they want to work and things that they like. As Sam touched on, gamification is also cool. I don't think it actually necessarily relates back to people playing games. People just don't like to be last in a league table. So regardless of whether people play computer games or not, whether it's your awareness training, we have a thing called scorecard for all of our components. So every single component gets a scoring scorecard for like reliability, some testing stuff, security, and a couple of other things. So there's just a page that everyone can go to that has each team and all of their components and everything from like an A+ to an F for their scores on different things, and we own what feeds under that. So kind of SaaS, DAS, pen testing, whatever else feeds into that, and it really works. We have people who sit there and go who will talk about what was in the last sprint and how they fixed scorecard issues in their sprint. So it takes away from us going, you must do this, to it just being part of how they work and how things are scored. And we don't have to run around saying, you've got to do X. I don't have to try and raise JIRAs for engineers or anything else, which is just horrible. We just put stuff into the scorecard. We work with them on things. And we'll tap people if stuff doesn't work, but they're much more empowered to go, all right, here's an issue, here's something, I can fix it, and I'll fix it in the best way for me or my team, rather than security coming and telling you how to do it. So just find different ways to engage and use ways to get people to want to fix things and want to work with you. And I think, as you just touched on, another talk about the benefits. So one of the big benefits is speed, right? If you have problems and you find them at the pen test stage or when they're in prod, or I want to release this tomorrow and there's all these high vulnerabilities, you then have a bunch of running around trying to fix stuff, things have to go live with risk, people run around going, who can accept the risk, all of this pain and slowing things down. Whereas if you just find stuff earlier and make it part of the process, you can deliver stuff much faster with much less risk and much better performance and everything else. So focus on those benefits and demonstrate over time that stuff is getting released with less problems and less challenges. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
I'll just say we had somebody from marketing say, can I add security to the presentation of this product? And they asked the security team. We said, okay, so what do you know about security, we asked. Well, it's secure, right? So whoever is going to use it is going to feel that this is a secure product. Great. So can you confirm it? Because we don't want to write it, though, if you don't confirm it to us. It's ticked, yeah. So we went into this interesting dance of us explaining kind of what we think security means and what they understand through security. It's always an interesting relationship between security and marketing. But we did get some other people involved as well, product managers and a few security champions. And then the discussion got a bit more interesting because they were slightly closer to marketing. They maybe spoke a few times before. They kind of knew each other. So the message eventually was understood by marketing, and the final phrase was transformed in a way that was speaking the truth, and in a way that the marketing people actually understood what we meant by that word secure or security. And to answer your question, I would say one of our biggest gains is this capability. Just having everyone understand that there is a little bit that they need to do, a little bit more that they need to do, and eventually not even realizing that they do it. I mean, we say security champions, but I would say maybe 3 to 5 years from now, in Sage, I don't even want to call them security champions anymore. I just want to say, yeah, stuff is secure. And who does it? Well, everybody does it. This also creates a bit of having security champions. People will be people all the time, so we'll say, oh, we've got a security champion. Oh, that guy's super smart. So he's in the team now. We write the code together. I don't need to care about security because the security champion is right here. So it creates this false impression of kind of security is already taken care of because this guy is here or this lady. But capability in the end, I think this is the final target for us.
I mean, where you're in an organisation with, and you are the only AppSec guy, and sort of building that up from zero. Okay, you're in an organisation with, my predecessor, there were 250,000 people in that organisation, and I was the only AppSec guy. And in this, in my, current tenure at sort of RB, again, sort of the first AppSec guy sort of through the gate. And I think, I kind of sort of joke that I'm kind of like Miley Cyrus on a wrecking ball when I go into, although slightly less handsome, more handsome. I'm trying to figure that out. But sort of joking aside, I think the key point is where you're starting from zero. How do you then sort of get buy-in and blowing stuff up? But most importantly, fixing what you find and hand-holding teams through that fix is kind of sort of mega important. But one of the byproducts of that, from an awareness point of view, is that these security champions just pop up. You're not sort of going around and saying, right, Joe or Mary, you're going to be a security champion in my organisation. Actually, people will kind of gravitate and like the stuff that you're doing and saying, hey, how do I know a bit more about this stuff? How do I then sort of take on board security and get that done within my sort of products and programs of work? And it's almost that byproduct that I don't think you can go out and say he or she is going to be a security champion. Actually, if you do some good stuff, people are naturally going to gravitate to you and ultimately do the do the right thing. And I think the big plus or the big positive for us is doing our stuff. People are coming to us and engaging with us to do security activities within the stuff that they do day to day.
That's a really nice dynamic. It's like a story where security was in the dungeon before, now you're actually let out into the light. And then you've engaged with developers and i.e. security champions. So you're starting that process with the long-term vision like Lucian has, is that security should be seamless, and it's done naturally, it's embedded and it's a habit. So I think that was a nice story of how we can actually move the needle, and actually security being a business asset rather than a cost center is a really important takeaway. And it's true that awareness, both from the dev but also from the top level as well. I think, guys, we're just after 10 o'clock. I know there's more questions on the screen. Especially, I really like the one around if you had money on it, do you think SQL injection will be written into code in 15 years' time? Yes or no?
Has anyone seen the new Star Trek? So there was one caption where SQL injection was mentioned, but this was here 2234 or something like that.
So yes.
Yes.
It's like when they used Nmap in one of the Matrix films. They were exploiting, was it SSH vulnerability that apparently was there for like 300 years, but anyhow.
Security in Hollywood, who knew it? Guys, I think that's a wrap. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning, but a special thank you to Sam, Catherine, Matias, and our panelists. Pleasure. And we'll also be sending out a survey, and the reason for the survey is not to hit any KPIs, but really it's about sharing knowledge and producing a report then at the end of this. So thanks again for attending, and see you all at the next Leaders in AppSec.